Mario and Luigi is the most consistent Mario RPG series. Legend of the Seven Stars is one game. All of Mario plus Rabbids games are good, but there's only two of them, and Paper Mario doesn't even know what it's supposed to be. Now, there are games in the Paper Mario series that aren't traditional RPGs that I think are very good. For example, I think Color Splash is a fantastic game, but as an RPG, it's pretty bad. So even if I like some of the newer Paper Mario games, the Mario and Luigi series is just way more consistent and far less controversial. I recently just beat Mario and Luigi Partners in Time, and with that, I have successfully beat every Mario and Luigi game, except the original Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story, but I beat the remake, so that's good enough. Today, I just thought I would talk about some of my opinions on every game. However, I felt a bit weird making this video since I haven't played the original Superstar Saga and Bowser's Inside Story, so I got somebody that has played those games to talk about them with me. Today, I will be joined by my friend the Burning Baron to talk about every Mario and Luigi game. Honestly, the Superstar Saga remake I don't have a ton to say about. It's a good game, but it's the Mario and Luigi game that I feel like I have the least to say about. The story is decent, the villain is decent, the locations are decent, everything about the game is just decent to me. It's obviously a good game, but compared to every other game in the series, not a lot about it stands out to me. Which is weird because it has a bunch of places and locations that are unique and a unique villain, but even so, the game in the series I have the least to say about. Ironically, I have way more to say about the Bowser's Minions side mode in the remake. The side mode is awesome, the Elite Captain Quartet are all great characters, and seeing their journey is super fun. I really hope they appear in Brothership so they can finally get to fight Mario. The way the side mode ties into the story of the main game is also really cute and charming. I hear a lot of people complain about the gameplay of the side mode, but honestly, I don't really get the hate. A lot of it is pretty automated, but you still have to do button inputs, and I just see it as the type of game to play in short bursts while watching TV or something. That's how I played it, and I had a good enough time doing it. This side mode really doesn't get enough credit. Although there is a continuity error in it, the Elite Trio have their Dream Team outfits, even though they haven't gotten their promotion yet at this time, so they shouldn't have those outfits. At first, I thought this was because they were just reusing the Dream Team models because they didn't feel like making new ones for their original designs, but then I remembered their original designs were actually in Dream Team, so I have no idea why they're wearing their Dream Team outfits. It's just a weird oversight by the team, and they probably just forgot that they shouldn't have these outfits yet. But it doesn't really matter, I just like to complain. Overall, the Superstar Saga remake is a great game. I can't compare it to the original since I've never played the original, but from what I've heard, I can gather it's basically better than the original in most ways. Like, yeah, they removed the Geno cameo for legal reasons, and there isn't a DK skeleton anymore, and that is lame, but that doesn't really ruin the game that much. It's just kind of lame. The remake is still better, it looks like. So yeah, anyway, now I'm going to let my friend Baron talk a little bit about the original Superstar Saga and how it compares to the remake.
Hey, what's up everyone? I'm the Burning Baron, but you can just call me the Baron. I think I'll jump right in, because I get to cover Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga first, as I have played the original, and I definitely have a lot I can say about it. So, first things first, Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga is not only the first game in the Mario & Luigi series, but it is also the first real RPG Mario game for a handheld system. The story takes place in the Bean Bean Kingdom as Mario and Luigi make their journey to try and save Princess Peach's voice, which was stolen by Cackletta, the evil Bean Witch, and her little minion Fawful. The story is honestly, I'd say pretty good. It doesn't seem to follow a very streamlined approach. Like, when I compare it to games like Paper Mario or The Thousand Year Door or even Partners in Time, those games seem to have you go from one area, then back to a main hub world, and then back out into the world to explore somewhere new. Where Superstar Saga seems to kind of go all over the place. You'll return to the main hub world every once in a while, which would be Beantown, or Bean Town, I believe. But sometimes you'll just get thrown off into other areas directly after exploring one area. A good example would be directly after exploring the Hoo University, you get thrown right out to an oasis, I believe. Oho Oasis? It's quite possible I'm getting some things mixed up. But you get thrown out to some other places directly after exploring general major areas. And on top of that, you're not exactly out to collect anything huge throughout the story. It's not like the Star Spirits from Paper Mario or the Cobalt Star from Partners in Time, but you're off doing all sorts of different tasks that generally help with the main idea of trying to recover Peach's voice and stop Cackletta. Cackletta really does feel like a smart and calculating villain, being able to see through a lot of different plots that the Mario Bros put together, as well as having a few interesting schemes of her own. So yeah, the story itself, I'd say, is pretty good for general Mario standards. It's not as high as some of the highs in the series, like Bowser's Inside Story or Thousand Year Door, but it's definitely a step up from our last RPG in the form of Paper Mario, which had a good plot, but really did just boil down to Mario versus Bowser at the end. It's honestly a really refreshing way to handle the story, honestly. It's nothing huge, it is a Mario game after all, there's nothing huge to the story. It's mostly just stop the bad guy of the week from doing whatever bad guy thing they're up to. But I actually do really like how they go about structuring the plot of the game. Moving on to the character aspect, the characters are, well, they're very diverse. However, they are a lot of beanish characters. That is the kind of the main species of the game, because you are in the Bean Kingdom, the neighboring kingdom of the Mushroom Kingdom. So a lot of the characters take on what they describe as a beanish look. They almost look like living beans, and I think it's really nice. The constant shade, like the constant use of the same green, kind of might get a little tiring, but there are still a few other unique NPCs. There are these snail-like characters that appear late in the game in a Winkle Coliseum, I believe. They're nothing too huge, but they are another interesting group. There's a town full of unique-looking toads. It is mostly beanish characters, but there are a few other unique individuals, like the Jellyfish Sisters, and some of the other aforementioned characters. And you'll find a lot of unique designs for the beanish characters, such as the wine or the Chocola Cola Chateau owners, or the Yoshi Egg Theater owner, and all them. So there are a lot of interesting characters. Of course, there are the main big ones like Queen Bean, Prince Peasley, and of course Cackletta and Fawful. I mean, I have to mention Fawful. He is like probably one of the most notable characters in the entire franchise, and this is where he started, as merely a minion to Cackletta, but also seeming like he kinda hints towards his future. But I'm getting ahead of myself. We're here to talk about Superstar Saga. Of course, I really do enjoy the story, and I do enjoy the characters, but I think what obviously needs to be talked about is the gameplay, because when you play a game, well, one of the most important things is how does it play. I'm going to be 100% honest, this game being a GBA title really shines through with its controls. I think to get right to the biggest nitpick or biggest problem I have with the original Superstar Saga is the overworld controls. Mario & Luigi is known for having many different overworld moves that help traverse different challenges. Iconic moves like the spin jump have come back in almost every game after, as well as different hammer moves like burrowing into the ground or squishing Mario to a smaller size to fit him through smaller spaces. In Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, however, being the very first game, it had a very weird way of handling these moves. Not only do you have to press the L and R buttons to shift through Mario and Luigi's different action commands, but sometimes you'll even have to swap Mario and Luigi's position overall, meaning that there are so many different combinations of positions that you need to get into to perform certain moves. For example, in order to perform the drilling into the ground move, I believe you need to have Luigi in the front and Mario in the back. I could be getting a little mixed up, but I think me getting mixed up on how these moves work is exactly a perfect example of how messy it was. Actually, I think a better example are the jumping moves. in order to perform the spin jump, Mario needs to be in front, where in order to perform the high jump, Luigi needs to be in front. And in order to shift between them, you have to press the start button, and then you have to press the L and R button to shift between the different moves. So it can get a little messy, especially with how many moves there are in this game. Not only are there 2 different jumping moves, but there are different hammer moves, there are different hand moves, and each of them have a different effect on whether or not the front brother is using the move or the back brother. So it gets really messy especially late in the game when you have every move. And that honestly was kind of a huge problem to me. It's what made the remake so much better. Where in the remake, all you had to do was press the L and R button to cycle through each and every move. Granted, it did take a long time to shift through every move, but I feel like I would rather be doing that than be shifting through action commands and brother positions. And then moving on to the battling. The battling is honestly the most tried and true throughout the series. Not much changes over the course of the game, or the series, when it comes to the battle. In Mario & Luigi Superstar Saga, action commands haven't really been established just yet. When you jump on an enemy, you only jump once, but it still is completely dependent on whether or not you nail the action command to deal more damage. So rather than jumping twice, you just do one big jump. Hammers basically act the same way as they do in most modern games. And then what's unique to the Superstar Saga are the hand moves, which offer a fire property for Mario and electric property for Luigi, adding more weaknesses and resistances to certain enemies. Some enemies might be weak to fire, some might resist fire, and the same deal with different electric moves. Of course, there's also the bro moves, which all have their own normal and advanced versions. They are relatively hard to get the hang of at first, especially considering that they have different challenge levels just to perform them. Sometimes you might want to take it easy just to learn the ropes of the moves at the cost of some power and maybe a bit more of an expensive BP cost. And once you've learned them very well, you can up the difficulty to remove some of the indicators to know what button to press, but it comes at the cost, well, not the cost, it comes with greater power and some slightly less BP cost. And if you master the moves, you'll start to learn advanced versions of these moves, which unlock completely new versions of the moves that start out in the same way as the originals, but you can press a different button or some kind of different sequence to make the move completely different. It's a little tricky to get the hang of. It's another thing that the remake 100% perfected, in the sense that it made all the advanced techniques their own individual moves. So rather than starting an old move to initiate a new one, you just get them all right out the gate, as well as an easy mode to slow down or give the indicators when you need them at the cost of a higher BP count. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I really do think Superstar Saga is a great game, but being an early GBA title, it definitely suffered from some first game syndrome that thankfully was fixed as time went on, especially with the remake. So I'm going to pass it right back to Goes with the Most so we can start talking about Partners in Time.
Now we move on to Mario & Luigi Partners in Time, which is probably the weirdest entry in the entire series, and unlike Superstar Saga, I have a lot to say about this game. First off, I have to say, I absolutely love the shrooms. They're super threatening, and I love that for the majority of the game, we don't know what they're saying. A lot of the locations in the game are a bit generic, but there are also a good amount of unique locations to balance it out. I especially love this game's darker tone. Like, it's not super depressing all the time or anything, but I love when the game does dabble in its darker atmosphere. I feel like the biggest standout is the petrified toads in Toadwood Forest, which are genuinely kind of disturbing. And I have to say, this game has the best box art in the entire series. It's not even a competition. Although the remake for Superstar Saga did have really good art too. Using 4 buttons to control the bros and their baby counterparts works a lot better than you would think it would, although sometimes I would get really confused during the bros attacks and end up messing them up. I guess my brain just can't handle that much. One minor complaint I have with the game is that sometimes enemies are in very unfair locations. Like one time I walked into a room and there was just an enemy right in front of me and I had to fight it. There's also no invincibility frames after you beat an enemy, which is kind of annoying because it means you can get right sucked into another battle. I also feel like some of the bosses have too much HP. To be fair, a lot of the times I fight bosses, I am underleveled, but I've heard this complaint from other people too. In the American version, a lot of the bosses have more health. There are a few exceptions, like Miss Thwomp, but for the most part, they seem to have more health in the American version, and it seems a bit unnecessary to me. A lot of the times it just feels like it drags out the fight for far too long, and it's not even really fun at that point. Surprisingly though, I don't actually mind both Princess Shroob fights having extra health. I thought both fights went on for exactly the right amount of time. I honestly think Elder Princess Shroob is the best final boss in the entire series. Strowzer does not count as the final boss, nobody cares about him. One of my other complaints with the game is that it doesn't really take advantage of the whole time travel thing that much. Every location you go to is in the past. The only place you go to in the present is Peach's Castle. With a game with time travel being its whole thing, you would think it would utilize it more. Nothing you do in the past ever affects the present, and that's because you never go anywhere in the present. The only time you do something in the past that affects the present is with EGAD coming up with the idea of the Hygge Gush at Thwomp Volcano. And it's just really weird, that's the only time it happened. Honestly, in a way, the whole time travel thing is kind of redundant. Besides the Baby Mario Bros, it would be really easy to just get rid of the whole time travel thing altogether. Instead of time portals, they could just be replaced with teleportation stations made by EGAD, or hell, even just warp pipes, and everything else would take place in the present and very little would change. It feels like they wanted to have Baby Mario and Luigi playable, so they did the whole time travel thing so it would make sense, but then they did nothing else with the idea. I feel like the Shroob invasion should have taken place in the present. It would have made a lot more sense story-wise. If the Shrews have already conquered the Mushroom Kingdom in the past, shouldn't they still be ruling in the present? I get it, it's time travel, and you're not supposed to think about it too much, but I feel like it would have made more sense if the invasion happened in the present, and you would go back to all of the same locations in the past to get the Cobalt Star pieces, so you would see the nice past locations, and then compare them to the present, and how they're all in ruin. Then, whenever you would do something in the past, it would affect the future, the present, whatever fucking time travel shit, and then you would be able to progress in the present. I think that would have worked a lot better. Also, if you die in a battle, you don't get the option to retry the battle. Your only options are to go to your last save point or go back to the title screen, which is basically the exact same as the first option except with an extra step. I'm really glad future Mario and Luigi games fix this problem. This is probably the Mario and Luigi game I have avoided fights in the most because of this, because if I do end up dying in battle somehow, then I have to go all the way back to my last save point, which in some cases can be quite a bit, and that's just kind of annoying. Like in most Mario RPGs, I'm underleveled, but usually not this much, or at least I don't feel like it is. I had to grind a bit before the final boss, but I bought a badge from Fawful so that Mario always had unlimited bros items. It was 90 beans, but it was worth it. Also, this doesn't have anything to do with anything, but why does Fawful use beans as a form of currency? Like, I know he's a bean person, and he's really weird and everything, but if anything, does that mean, that would be like if humans used flesh as currency. This just kind of fucked up when you think about it. Anyway, I think Partners in Time is a very good game, but also very flawed. Also, I wanted to mention this, but I didn't really have a good place to squeeze it in, so I'm just going to do it at the end. But I always thought Petey Piranha was wearing a Speedo, but according to this game, it's a diaper. And I don't really know how to feel about that. Anyway, now let's see what Baron has to say about this game.
Partners in Time is kind of the black sheep of the Mario and Luigi games. Despite Paper Jam existing. But I still feel like it's a fantastic game regardless. It's a little bit odd with its 4-button controls over the course of Mario, Luigi, and their baby counterparts, but I feel like it kind of works better than most people would think it would. Mario and Luigi control with the A and B buttons as usual, while Baby Mario and Baby Luigi get the X and Y buttons. It does add a little bit of complexity for the characters, especially when you have to swap between Mario and Luigi and their baby counterparts from time to time, but I believe that's also where a large portion of the improvements happen. Because unlike Superstar Saga, each and every move is now tied to the individual jumps and hammers. Which means that if you have the hammers out, you automatically have access to the hammer-related moves. Or at least when you learn them. It's rather than having to swap places with the brothers and then swap their own action commands. So, in a way, the controls almost got easier and more complicated at the same time. In terms of its story, it does seem to follow a similar pattern to that of Paper Mario or Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door, where each individual location is its own unique world, and then you're taken back to the hub. If I want to add any sort of, well, relative nitpick, I would actually have to say that it's interesting that none of the locations seem to be very affected by the Shroob invasion. Barring Peach's Castle and Toad Town and I guess Holly Jolly Village, places like Thwomp Volcano, Gritzy Desert all seem completely untouched from Shroob activity, despite how active they are in various locations. Like, the Koopaceum was completely taken over by Shroobs, yet there was absolutely no real sign of Shroob activity outside of the Colosseum. No giant mushrooms, no dark environment, no nothing. It almost kind of felt like they were just there, without actually taking over anything. I guess another location that really does show their invasion was Toadwood Forest, which is essentially used as a prison for toads and a means of seeping their life energy away from them. But other than that, it seems a little odd that none of the locations reflect the invasion. For the characters, it seems a little bit more diverse when compared to Superstar Saga, where the characters are a bunch of different species as opposed to naturally being limited to Beanish type characters. You've got characters like Kylie Koopa, who is a bit over the top, but equally funny at the same time. You've got characters like Toadbert, who kind of act as support characters for the story, and then there are dozens of Yoshis in Yoshi's Island, and a few recurring faces in terms of bosses like Petey Piranha. It's a good spread of characters and a good spread of unique individuals debuting in Partners in Time. It's a good cast, honestly, even if it is a little bit more on the limited side.
So now here we are at Bowser's Inside Story, the crown jewel of the Mario and Luigi series according to a lot of people. So what do I think of it? It's pretty good, although it's definitely not flawless. Also, I have never played the original, so keep in mind I will be judging this based off the remake. I hate to start off with a negative right off the bat, but all of the damn mini-games are awful. All of them suck. Okay, actually, I didn't mind the leg pushing one, but all the other ones suck, especially the carrot one. Normally, I wouldn't mind these minigames, as there are minigames in the other games, but they're so redundant in Inside Story. They're so frequent, and a lot of them repeat multiple times throughout the game, so it's just really annoying. Anyway, moving on from that, I really have to give this game points for creativity. Having Mario and Luigi explore the inside of Bowser is definitely an idea for a game, although Alpha Dream is definitely not beating the allegations of them having a vor fetish. They literally go inside Bowser's ass, and here I thought that was a Rule 34 exclusive. Actually, now that I think about it, you go into a mutated Yoshi's ass in Partners in Time. Also, there's a bros attack where Luigi gets fat, and Bowser gets fat too, so they're not beating the inflation fetish allegations either. But whatever, I don't kink shame. Honestly, not gonna lie, there are a few times playing the game where I genuinely got kind of nauseous. Like, the bros do some grotesque things inside of Bowser, like dig into him and break his bones. Maybe I'm just weak, but man, I don't like thinking about that stuff. Playing this game really made me appreciate Fawful. I always liked him, but he was never my favorite like he was for a lot of people. But after playing this game, I can definitely see why he's so liked. He was in Superstar Saga and Partners in Time, but this is the game where he really gets to shine. I've heard a lot of people complain about the remake's frame rate, but honestly, I really don't think it's that big of a deal. Like, it takes 2 seconds longer to get into battles, and that's about it. Everything ran perfectly fine for me. Also, you don't have to breathe into the microphone to breathe fire in giant battles anymore now. And according to literally everybody, that was awful, so that has to be some points in the remake's court. One very interesting change from the original and its remake is the final area. In the original, it's literally just Peach's castle, except with some Fawful stuff all over the place. It's honestly kind of weird. The tone is super dark and dire, but you're walking through this pleasant-looking castle. Although I can definitely see somebody making a case for that actually being a positive, since it's different from other Mario game finales. In the remake, the Peach's castle looks completely different. It no longer feels like Peach's castle, except with some Fawful stuff all over the place. In the remake, it feels like Fawful's castle. In a way, that does make it a bit more generic as a final area, but it fits the tone a lot better if you ask me. Also, the original having Tough Guy Alert played during the Dark Star and Dark Fawful fights is just super wrong tonally. The music doesn't fit at all. I'm really glad that in the remake, they gave the Dark Star and Dark Fawful their own battle themes, and both of which are excellent. I think the game does a really good job of balancing as playing as the Bros and Bowser. I feel like I spend the perfect amount of time with each of them before switching over to the other. The Bros are fun to play as usual, and Bowser is just as good. One thing I especially love is the optional Shrooms boss fight in Bowser's Freezer. The Mario and Luigi series is very unique when it comes to the Mario universe, as it's the only Mario series to consistently have continuity. Paper Mario kind of has continuity, but really that just boils down to seeing your past partners in the background of Mario's house and finding notes in the garbage and sticker stars. Closest thing Paper Mario has to being on the same level as Mario and Luigi with this continuity is running into one of your partners from the first game in the Thousand Year Door. One nitpick I do have with the Shroob boss fight is that it doesn't play the Partners in Time boss battle music, and that would have just been the perfect touch. Also, I'm not sure how Editor Princess Shroob appears in the background frozen, even though she was turned into a mushroom and then eaten by Bowser at the end of Partners in Time, but whatever. I'm gonna choose not to question Bowser Jr.'s journey, just like Bowser's Minions before, is a fantastic side mode. The story is even better than it was in Bowser's Minions, and Bowser's Minions already had a great story. Bowser Jr. actually goes through character development, and it's actually interesting. What a concept. Honestly, I would say Bowser Jr.'s Journey is the best Mario story we've gotten since Super Paper Mario. I'm not saying it's a masterpiece or anything, and if you really wanted to, you could definitely poke holes in it, but for a Mario game and for what it is, it's pretty good. Junior's Journey, Bowser's Minions, and Paper Mario Color Splash are the only games where I've actually liked the Koopalings because they're actually allowed to have personalities and be interesting in these games. The Koopalings were in Superstar Saga, but in the original version of the game, they didn't even talk. Talk in the remake, but they only get like 3 lines each and some even less. They did appear in Paper Jam, and while I really like their boss battles in that game, none of their dialogue was really that noteworthy. Bowser Jr.'s Journey is a pretty substantial improvement gameplay-wise compared to Bowser's Minions, not that anyone ever talks about that, considering barely anybody played these side modes. Something interesting I think is worth noting is that Junior's Journey actually fixes a plot hole with the original Bowser's Inside Story. Actually, I'm not really sure if I would call it a plot hole. I'm not sure if that's the correct term, but whatever. It's a story thing that doesn't make sense. After Bowser is launched out of Peach's castle at the beginning of the game, Kamek assists him for the tutorial. What's weird is that after Bowser starts sucking everything... No, wait, no. That did not come out right. We're gonna try that again. After Bowser eats the vacuum shroom, Kamek completely disappears from the game, only to reappear during the epilogue like he just wasn't missing the entire game. Junior's Journey fixes this issue with the original game by revealing that Kamek simply got sidetracked with Junior's antics and decided to babysit him instead of trying to find Bowser. Anyway, that long aside, the BFFs are fantastic. They're probably the most underrated Mario villains of all time. I cannot explain to you how much I wish you could fight their final form as the Bros. One thing I recently thought about when it comes to Bowser Jr.'s Journey that I think is really weird are the Shroobs. There's one level in the game where you go in Bowser's freezer and some of them thaw out and you fight them, and that makes sense, but later in the game you fight a ton of Shroobs just outside of Bowser's castle. Some of them are even powered up with Melatonin Formula X. How many Shroobs have thawed out? It's possible the developers were reusing enemies, but there's already a ton of enemies in the game, so I find that unlikely. Why use them again when it wouldn't even make sense? Honestly, part of me wonders if the original plan for the next Mario and Luigi game was to bring back the Shroobs and they were supposed to be the main threat again, and this was supposed to be foreshadowing. Also, I do think it's a bit weird that Kamek doesn't comment on the Shroobs at all during Junior's Journey, even though he was around for the events of Partners in Time, but then again, nobody really asks him about it, so I guess he didn't really care to bring it up. One thing I hear about people complain a lot about the Bowser's Inside Story remake specifically is the music. Apparently a lot of people think it's bad, but it's really not. It's perfectly fine if you prefer the original game soundtrack, but saying the remakes is bad just feels wrong to me. In fact, in a lot of cases, I prefer the remakes music, although it is really weird how they decided to change the title theme. Another thing I hear people complain about with both remakes is how the 3D models remove a lot of the charm from the game that the sprites had, and I think this is really just a preference thing. Yeah, the sprites probably have charm the 3D models can't capture, but I'm sure you could make the same argument vice versa. It's just preference if you prefer the original sprites or the 3D models more. Personally, I prefer the 3D models, although that could be because I grew up with Dream Team, but I honestly have no idea. Before we go to my friend to see what his opinion on all of this is, I just want to say that the Bowser's Inside Story remake did not make Alpha Dream go bankrupt. That is not what happened. One game bombing shouldn't bankrupt an entire company single-handedly, or at least any healthy company. Truth is, Alpha Dream was already in a ton of debt before the Bowser's Inside Story remake. A lot of people think it's weird they decided to remake this game on the 3DS, considering you can already play the original on the 3DS, and I thought the same for a while, but then I thought a little more about it. The way I see it, the Bowser's Inside Story remake was a Hail Mary. It was their most popular game, and they didn't have the money to make a Switch remake, so the best they could do was a 3DS remake. It didn't make sense, but it didn't really matter matter since that was their only option. When you look at it from that perspective, it actually makes sense. So while the remake bombing definitely didn't help matters, it didn't single-handedly sink the whole company. Anyway, with all that being said, let's switch over to the Baron.
Bowser's Inside Story is often regarded as the best game in the franchise, and I'd argue it's for very, very good reasons. First off, its story is phenomenal. Having Fawful return to the spotlight as the main antagonist, and going the full mile with his character and in his ambitions. It's really impressive what they did with Fawful in this game, and it really does paint him as a true villain across the Mario and Luigi series. The story is a lot more like Superstar Saga, where rather than be returning to a hub world every time you finish an objective, you just keep exploring the overworld, either as Mario and Luigi or as Bowser. Mario and Luigi also primarily take place inside of Bowser, which offers a more world map style location design where you jump from place to place within Bowser's body and explore those different areas. Whereas Bowser is exploring the overworld, where he has to basically walk from place to place every single time. During the story, however, there are points where you're going to get launched into other places and immediately start a brand new location, fresh out of an old one. It usually does a very good job at balancing between Bowser bits and Mario and Luigi bits, with Mario and Luigi occasionally having to explore the overworld as well. Character-wise, well, I've already mentioned Fawful. I don't even know if I need to mention more. He kinda steals the show. But beyond him, you've got characters like Starlo, who makes her debut as your brand new partner for the game. I understand that maybe she doesn't exactly rub everyone the right way, but I actually personally very much enjoy her. She gets along with the Mario brothers for the most part, you know, when she's not outright insulting Luigi for his cowardly personality, but overall, it is clear that she's a good character at heart, and gets along very well with them, even through her occasional spits with Luigi. You've got characters like Dr. Toadley, who are kind of entertaining when they pop up, and, of course, the Elite Trio, who makes their debut in this game. While they do kind of start out as iffy, incompetent henchmen turned later traitors, I think they get their redemption arc later in the series. Control-wise, I definitely think this is the best the gameplay has ever been. With the removal of Baby Mario and Baby Luigi and returning to the simplified A and B format, every move is now tied to the hammers and the jumps, and then the spin jump and extra moves are actually tied to their own unique menu. So, once again, rather than flicking through the bros' position and then flicking through their individual moves, all you need to do is flick through the jump, the hammer, and then a few special moves, and that's it. Bowser's the exact same way, swapping between his punching and breathing of fire to his body slam and his shell roll-up, among other moves. It really does feel like it's all organized this time around, and flipping through moves is incredibly easy and hardly considered a hassle at all. Much like other games, of course, there are always the tutorials in the game, but this is also completely confined to anything new and unique, and while tutorials are a bit of a slowdown in the gameplay, I don't think they're as nearly as common in Bowser's Inside Story as a more infamous example down the line. And everything is made completely shorter when it comes to the remake, with most of the tutorials being glossed over entirely, and everything being sped up greatly, especially with the introduction of a cutscene fast-forwarding idea. It makes the game much faster, and it allows you to get through those tough and slow parts much better. I do want to reiterate some of the positives I had with both the remakes. Superstar Saga's biggest improvements were definitely the controls, and being able to figure out where to go a little bit easier. I also don't really have much of a preference between the original Bowser's Inside Story and the remake. The remake is fine, but the original is just as good, and it doesn't feel like too much changes, other than the aforementioned ability to speed up cutscenes. That was a fairly useful thing to add. But I think what I can talk about is the side stories that both games offer. While I didn't really invest myself too much in them, the gameplay felt a little too automated for me. I feel like the stories were actually quite interesting, especially Bowser Jr.'s journey, which I feel gave great character development to both Bowser Jr. and to the Koopalings to a degree. In Superstar Saga's Bowser's Minions, The story follows Captain Goomba, Koopa, Boo, and Shy Guy as they try to rescue Bowser and the rest of Bowser's minions from Waffle's clutches. It's a pretty simple story that shows how loyal the minions can be, and it shows the reluctance the Koopalings have to rely on the minions, but also shows that they're willing to turn around if they prove themselves worthy. But Bowser Jr.'s journey is by and far way more interesting in terms of its plot, with Bowser Jr. going through amazing character development that he has not seen in the entire franchise. The story starts with Bowser Jr. being relatively rude, bossy, and belittling to his minions, but slowly begins to learn how to be a proper leader when all the Koopalings abandon him, and the best fitness friends play him for a chump and take Morton away. It's honestly really nice to see out of someone like Bowser Jr., who is almost consistently portrayed as more of a spoiled brat than he is anything else. I will admit that he has had other really good moments, like the ending of Sunshine, but overall Bowser Jr. is kind of a bratty character. But the Jr.'s journey adventure really did well for him. Even the Koopalings had really good roles within the story, with characters like Ludwig, Roy, and especially Morton getting some decent development out of them. Ludwig once again showing how clever and cunning he can be by fooling the best fitness friends and disguising himself as Beef to infiltrate their plans and learn more about what they're up to. Roy was, well, he was Roy. He's a bully, and he definitely had that arrogant, tough guy show, but I think none of the Koopalings developed more than Morton did, who is once again still portrayed as a meat-headed dumbass, but at the same time, he was shown to be incredibly loyal to Bowser Jr., despite how rude and ungrateful Bowser Jr. was towards Morton. Morton went out of his way to fry him up a drumstick, despite his fire being stronger and charring the drumstick, and offered to stand by Bowser Jr. no matter what happened, and everything went fine until the best fitness friends took him over. And once they rescued him, well, it was fine after that, and it just shows how great of a character Morton really was, despite being a, well, meathead. I feel like the Bowser Jr.'s journey was an amazing story, and while I didn't really care much about the gameplay aspects of the two side stories, I found that the stories themselves were very well written and very well put together. And I think that's what matters the most.
We are now at Mario & Luigi Dream Team, and anybody who calls it Dream Team Bros is automatically dead to me. Same goes for Paper Jam Bros. This is the Mario & Luigi game I grew up with, so I have a lot of nostalgia for it. I would repeatedly replay the beginning of the game just so I could hear Phantasma's kick-ass theme on the Zeppelin. This was before I knew what YouTube was. Despite growing up with this game, I didn't actually beat it until a few years ago. At some point later in the game, you have to get a part to a bed, and the only way to do that is to beat a boss in the battle ring, and you have to beat it in a specific amount of turns, but I was underleveled, so I couldn't beat it, and I didn't feel like grinding, so I just gave up. This was the first Mario & Luigi game to switch to 3D models, and I can say this game looks super good. Somnon Woods in particular looks especially great. Since I did grow up with this game, I could prefer the 3D models over the sprites because of this, as mentioned before, but again, I'm not really sure. The most well-known thing about Dream Team is probably its tutorials, and not for very favorable reasons. Basically, Dream Team has a ton of non-skippable tutorials throughout the game, and they can get rather grating. I heard a lot of people complain about partners in time tutorials, but those tutorials never bothered me. Maybe Dream Team just made me numb to them or something. Dream Team tutorials might not sound like that big of a deal, but trust me, they get annoying fast. You may be wondering why this game is called Dream Team, but actually that's definitely not what you're wondering, because there's no way anybody who isn't a Mario & Luigi fan is watching this video. Sections within the Dream World I think can best be described as decent. I feel like there's a lot more they could have done with the Dream World. Dreams can tell us a lot about a person, or they can just be really random and weird. Now, we definitely do get some stuff like that, but I feel like it could have been pushed a lot further. The best part of the Dream World is easily the boss battles. The Legionary attacks are awesome and so fun to use. The fight against the Elite Trio is one of the best boss fights in the entire series. I love if Brothership had a similar fight to it, except with the Elite Captain Quartet from Bowser's Minions and Junior's Journey. Driftwood Shore is the worst area in the game, and the Elite Trio boss fight is really its only saving grace, so thank God it's there. Throwing this out there, though, it makes no sense that the Elite Trio got a promotion in this game. Why are they Bowser's elite personal guard? They literally betrayed him in the last game. Why would he promote them? Is Bowser that stupid? Actually, he probably is. It just feels really weird. I love the Elite Trio as much as the next guy, but it just doesn't make any sense, but I'm probably the only person that cares about this, although it does kind of lead into another major problem I have with the game, that being the writing, specifically the story. The problem with this game's story is tied to one character, and that one character is Bowser. Bowser has way too big of a role in this game. He is literally the main villain, and Tasma is so damn cool, but the game constantly feels like it's undermining him by having Bowser be the bigger threat, even though he absolutely should not be. Tasma is a king, yet he has no underlings. All his minions are Bowser's. It's not Tasma's castle, or Bowser and Tasma castle, it's just Bowser's castle. I hear the scene where Bowser betrays Tasma get a lot of praise, but I absolutely hate that scene. Villains betraying each other is such a cliche. Like, I get they're villains and they're evil and stuff, but it's really old and annoying to me. Also, Bowser betraying Tasma adds literally nothing to the story. You could cut it out and nothing would change. It's just so stupid and lame. I hear a lot of people defend Bowser overshadowing Tasma in Dream Team by saying that Bowser was a fool in all of the other Mario and Luigi games, and him being a real threat is character development for him, which is why he's the main villain in Dream Team. And I do see where they're coming from with that, but at the same time, for the lack of a better term, I don't fucking care. Bowser is the main villain for almost every Mario game. I don't want him to be the main villain of the RPGs too, even if it does kind of make sense, especially when Tasma is right there. I don't want him to be the main villain at all. I don't care. Dreamy Bowser is a cool final boss, but imagine how much cooler it would have been if Bowser and Tasma fused together or something like that. That would have been rad as hell. Also, Tasma literally dies from inflation. I know I said I don't king shame, but what the fuck? Something cool, but also really weird, is how characters from every past game in the series makes a comeback in this game. Popple from Superstar Saga, Kylie from Partners in Time, and Brock Messoir, or whatever the fuck his name is, from Bowser's Inside Story. What's weird is that none of them remember or recognize the Mario Bros. What makes this especially weird is, as stated before, the Mario and Luigi series is the one part of the Mario universe to have consistent continuity. Starlo is here from Bowser's Inside Story, and at least she remembers the bros, but still, it's weird that no one else does, It feels like they wanted to bring these old characters back, but they didn't want them to mention the games they were originally from to not confuse new players or something, but that really wouldn't make any sense because, again, Starlo is here from Inside Story, and she still remembers the bros, so I really don't know why it would have been that big of a deal. I spent a lot of time complaining, but Dream Team is nowhere near a bad game. In fact, it's quite good. It's just annoying because it has these problems that really feel like they shouldn't be there, and could be fixed pretty easily, but just weren't. Although one nice thing is that it added a quality of life thing where you can save whenever you want, and I'm pretty sure this is the first game in the series to do that. It's in Paper Jam as well, and the Superstar Saga remake. Not in the Bowser's Inside Story remake for some reason. I really don't know why. Anyway, you know by now. Baron, do your thing.
I have to promise myself and the Ghost with the Most not to take up too much time here, because now I have to gush about Mario and Luigi Dream Team. This game became one of my favorites, overtaking Partners in Time after a bit of thought. And even though I still love Partners in Time, I really, really love Dream Team. If I want to get the one big problem out of the way, yes, I am aware that the tutorials throughout the game bog the experience down greatly for many people, with the game having to stop you every single time something new comes up, and even having to stop you again if the concept returns at any point. Yes, I understand it's a bit of a bog down, and I understand that it is very much slower in this game than it had ever been in the entire franchise. However, for me, that's just not enough to bog down the overall experience. The characters are phenomenal, the locations are bright and colorful, and even if they do follow a very similar path of typical grassland, desert, beach, and such, I feel like the overall themes of each area do a lot better to flesh them out as more unique compared to the bog standard New Super Mario Bros. Themes that this era of Nintendo seems to gravitate towards. Mount Pajamaja is a big mountain filled with muscly looking rocks that are almost based on character styled rocks. Like, they look like individual characters. They're not, they're just rocks. Salmon Woods is actually a much more mysterious and interesting woodland area when compared to the jungly themes of New Super Mario Bros. As well. I just feel like the overall environments do a lot better than, well, most future games in the safe era of Nintendo. Of course, there's also the characters. You've got some interesting familiar and returning faces in the form of Kylie Koopa and Popple, who are actually really welcome faces, even though they don't really contribute too much to the story. And I think what annoyed me the most about them is that none of them actually remember Mario and Luigi, despite Popple especially referencing drips in red and green. You would really think that he would recognize Mario and Luigi after all the trouble they caused for him. Other over-the-top characters include the Massif Bros, who constantly spam a love of beef in the most hilarious way possible, calling themselves giant steaks and Mario and Luigi side salads or tender cutlets at best. It's just a joy to listen to. On top of that, Dreambird is also an incredibly lovable ally who I'd wager is just a little bit better than Starlo, but at the same time, he doesn't come across as nearly as humorous when it comes to the interactions he has with other characters. He's a bit more of a serious, down-to-earth kind of character, but I think that bounces off the comedic value of characters like Luigi very well. I think another standout example is the Bedsmith, who kind of gives off a very flamboyant personality to him, and I find that very refreshing for that day and age. It's amusing, and I think that the colorful cast of characters did the game wonders. Of course, we also have to talk about some of the antagonistic figures. Antasma especially. While he's no Fawful, Antasma did a very good job at filling the antagonistic role. And while a large portion of his spotlight was stolen by Bowser, Bowser was no slouch on the character department either. Given that this game was also released during the year of Luigi, it was really nice to see him actually call Luigi by his real name at the end of the game. Speaking of Bowser and his minions, you also have the Elite Trio coming back, who actively acted as a much more competent group this time around. Yeah, sure, they still lost their battle against Mario and Luigi, but they still fought Mario and Luigi, unlike in Bowser's Inside Story, and their boss fight was really fun as well. No doubt about it. Kamek also returns, but he acts as the typical snarky advisor, and he kind of just acts as a punishment role for the Elite Trio, often demoting them to humiliating tasks whenever they fail at their initial ones. It's typical Kamek stuff, honestly. More talk about Antasma, though. I think the biggest disappointment was how he ended, where his entire role was just completely taken over by Bowser. Don't get me wrong, I'm glad what we got out of Bowser in the finale, but it does feel like Antasma got ripped off in the story. I really do have to give Dreamy Bowser the gold medal for final bosses. I know a lot of people are going to say that Dark Bowser and the Dark Star Core were the pinnacle of final bosses, but Dreamy Bowser is just something else for me. A massive challenge, one that persists every single time I personally have played the game. It's just amazing what they pulled off with him. Fighting real-world mechanics against dream world levels of enemies, facing off against his massive health pool, and the fact that his attacks are fast and that he heals when his dreamy minions are out. It's a crazy final battle that ups the difficulty in a way I have yet to see the series ever really stoop to. Sure, Cackleta's soul was hard, but that relied more on the fact that you were dropped to 1 HP to the second phase. That's kind of a cheap shot if you ask me. Dreamy Bowser was just hard throughout the entire thing, and that's what's the most impressive to me. So yeah, I honestly have so much that I love about Dream Team, but I think I've gushed enough.
Alright, here we are, the final game on our list today, and what do you know, it's the weakest one. Mario and Luigi Paper Jam, oh boy. This game. Now, to start off, is Paper Jam a bad game? No, not really. It plays well, it's functional, and the battle system is pretty fun. I've heard some people complain that the battle system can be slow at times, like some of the bros attacks and trio attacks take way too long in the game, and I can see where they're coming from. Personally, that never really bothered me. Basically, what I'm trying to say is that the problem with Paper Jam doesn't have a lot to do with the gameplay for the most part. Paper Jam is a crossover between the Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario series, a crossover between these two two series has immense potential. There is so much they could have done. This was the team's chance to be at their most creative, but as you might know, instead we got one of the most uncreative Mario games ever made. Paper Jam is such a weird game, because for the most part, it's not disliked for what it is, it's disliked for what it isn't. Normally, I don't like when something is judged off of what it isn't, because I think it's way better to look at something for what it is. I will defend Hey Pikmin and Metroid Prime Federation Force till the day I die, but with Paper Jam it's incredibly hard to do that. Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario having a crossover is such a cool idea, and there's so much potential. The problem is that Paper Jam doesn't utilize any of that potential. The entire reason people like crossovers is because it's cool to see characters that would never otherwise interact meet and get into a bunch of wacky shenanigans together. Paper Jam doesn't do anything but the fact that it's a crossover. The only unique characters in the game are Starlo and Power Tower Pokey from Sticker Star for God knows what reason. People wanted Dementio and Fawful to team up, Kamek and Cammy to interact, Mario and Luigi to be weirded out by Paper Luigi casually speaking in full sentences, but we didn't get any of that. That stuff may seem like fanfiction, but that's kind of the entire point of a crossover. Paper Jam's writing isn't bad per se, but it's not what people wanted, and it's not what a crossover should be. It also doesn't help that all of the locations are generic Mario locations with nothing special about them, and the plot is just Bowser kidnapping Peach, except this time there's 2 Bowsers and 2 Peaches. Paper Jam is a good game because at the end of the day, its gameplay is good, and that is the most important thing when it comes to games. However, it will never sit right with people because it fundamentally misunderstands why the idea of a Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario crossover was so exciting in the first place. Due to this, Paper Jam will be remembered as nothing more than a massive missed opportunity. Because Paper Jam lacks any creativity and personality, the entire game leaves a sour taste in your mouth. It just goes to show how much presentation is important in a game. Even simple things can go a long way. Look at Mario Odyssey's story. When you boil it down, it really is just Bowser kidnapping Peach, but they added enough flair and pizzazz to make it at least somewhat more interesting. Paper Jam doesn't do anything of the sort. Furthermore, Paper Jam has some really weird writing. Bowser Jr. and Paper Bowser Jr. are really important characters at the beginning of the game, and in the middle, but after you beat them up at Bowser's Castle, they completely disappear, never to be seen or mentioned again. Bowser and Paper Bowser plan to betray each other in one scene, but that never happens and is never mentioned again. The game's narrative just feels so half-assed and incomplete. Another weird thing is that it reuses Neo Bowser's Castle as the final area, just like Neo Bowser Castle was the final area in Dream Team, but they never acknowledge that Bowser has already had a Neo Bowser Castle. None of the previous Mario and Luigi games or Paper Mario games are mentioned at all. There are some remixes from other Mario and Luigi games, and there are a few Sticker Star references, but that's about it. Sticker Star gets the most Paper Mario references, but that really isn't saying much, because even then, Sticker Star barely gets anything. I honestly wish Sticker Star elements were in the game more. I know people definitely would have complained if Sticker Star got more representation than any of the other games, but considering the game we got hasn't had representation from any of the Paper Mario games, I would have at least taken some Sticker Star stuff. Hell, put Kirsty in the game. It would have been kinda cool to see her and Starlo interact. Sticker Star is known as one of the most uncreative Mario games ever made, but what's sad is that Paper Jam is far more uncreative than even Sticker Star was. Sticker Star had Chain Jump Ruins in the Enigma Mansion. Paper Jam doesn't have anything like that at all. The closest thing it has to something unique is the Lakitu Info Centers, but not much happens there. It's just a base to do Paper Toad missions. I hear a lot of people complain about the Paper Toad missions, but personally I never really minded them. Paper Jam should have gone all out with its absurdity. They should have just gone full fanfiction with it. That would have been way more interesting than the most bland story ever. They could have made the fanfiction element a part of the plot. There's already a magic book in the game, so what if whatever was written in the book would actually happen? Some psychopathic Mario fan could actually find the book and start writing Mario fanfiction in it, and then all that stuff would actually happen. That way they could bring back dead characters like Fawful and Dementio. I would love if we got a Paper Jam 2 one day, because a Mario and Luigi and Paper Mario crossover that truly utilizes both series could be incredible, but until that day should ever come, we're stuck with this. It's kind of a bummer this is the game we have to end on, but on the bright side, Brothership is coming out soon and hopefully it'll be good. Now, for one last time, Baron will give you his opinion on all of this.
I think the common consensus when it comes to talking about Mario and Luigi Paper Jam is the phrase wasted potential. Mario and Luigi Paper Jam was an amazing idea in theory, but the problem is it was executed very poorly. They took two of the most creative Mario franchises and played it safe. I don't think anybody was asking for them to play it safe with these two series, especially after what they delivered with Paper Mario Sticker Star. Mario & Luigi Paper Jam has a very bare bones story, very minimal character design, and while the gameplay actually is fun and very faithful to Mario and Luigi, everything else just feels so boring, to be honest. If we want to talk more about the gameplay, I feel like it's just the standard Mario and Luigi, and I think it did the multiple character thing better than Partners in Time did. And the trio moves are 100% a lot of fun to perform. But other than that, the characters are all just Toads. Everything is very generic in its looks. There was nothing unique about the paper aspect of the game. And the story was just boring and bare bones. It's just Bowser plotting to take over the Mushroom Kingdom again. And even with Paper Bowser, they didn't really work with him at any point. The closest we ever got to something interesting was both Bowsers planning on betraying each other, but you never saw any of it. Papercraft battles, while fun, weren't nearly as good as the giant battles. I think the general consensus is just still correct. It's a boring, wasted potential. There was so much they could have done with this series, yet neither franchise even bothered to acknowledge other games in the series. No mentions of Fawful, no mentions of the Bean Bean Kingdom, no mentions of the Blorb Pandemic, no mentions of Dream Team Adventure, nothing from the Paper Mario side. There was just nothing that this game did that was really interesting, other than just cross over two franchises that were known for their creativity and not using any of that creativity. It was a large disappointment in my eyes, and I think it was a large disappointment in a lot of other people's eyes too. The gameplay was fine, and at least that was still intact, but I think it's just wholeheartedly agreed that they could have done so much better with this. I think that'll be it for what I have to say on these games. I want to once again thank the Ghost with the Most for having me on board with this, and I hope you guys all enjoyed this video.
And with all of that being said, those were all of our thoughts on every Mario & Luigi game. Thank you so much to my friend, the Burning Baron, for making this video with me. It truly was an honor. Now, to end things off, all I have to say is that if I had a nickel for every time Bowser turned into a black woman, I would have 1 nickel, which isn't a lot, but it's weird that it happened even once. I'm going to hell.